Hi, I'm therapeutic yoga professional Lisa Dumas.
I'm Amy Pruitt. I'm a registered nurse, an Ayurvedic practitioner, and a yoga teacher.
And Amy and I are the co-hosts of our podcast called the Radiant Warrior Podcast, which comes out every week. And in it, we share real talk about how these sacred sciences of yoga and Ayurveda support us to, as we say, reclaim our courageous hearts. And cultivating authentic courage is what I'm most interested in because for years I was in the grips of a very life altering anxiety disorder and panic disorder. And it was my experience with yoga and meditation that really helped me to meet and befriend anxiety and eventually move through anxiety and learn from it. And so that's a little bit of what we're going to share here with you today.
And my experience with yoga and Ayurveda was my journey of overcoming and recovering from intense burnout and grief. I spent many years in the emergency room, over 20 years, taking care of others, and came to a real burnout point in my career and in my life. And I found Ayurveda and I found yoga, and the tools and the practices that I was exposed to really helped me to reclaim my own courageous heart, to recover my body, my spirit, and my emotional heart. So I love sharing Ayurveda and yoga now to my clients and students and on the podcast, and helping others to find these practices so helpful in their own journey with burnout and grief.
And if you're watching this video, you're likely interested in living with a little less fear and a little more confidence and courage. So first, just a little bit of a note about anxiety and what it is from a Western perspective. Now, from a Western perspective, you can think of anxiety as a nervous system. So either because of predisposition or lifestyle choices, or like me, a life really spent living on the edge of our seats, just trying to live up to and trying to reach for approval and love externally rather than remembering that we can find it within. All of these factors can contribute to our experience of living in the fight, flight, or freeze side of the nervous system. And this causes us to feel very discontent. We feel nervous. We have all of the symptoms of anxiety, which is just really what our body is wanting to do in order to create balance. So we have the trembling and we have the perspiration, we have the elevated heart rate, and all of that can feel really scary. And living with that kind of fear and nervousness, it causes us to shrink from our full potential. And it's hard for us to really step into who we're meant to be when we're in that situation. So from a Western perspective, that's what's going on.
From an Eastern perspective, anxiety is an imbalance of the energies in your body, not just the physical energy, but also the subtle energies of our body. Ayurveda classifies our unique composition into what's called the doshas. And we have 3 doshas. Everyone has all 3. And anxiety is an imbalance of what we call the vata dosha. So you hear us talk about vata dosha a lot on our podcast. And vata is the dosha that's made up of air and ether. So it's very light, it's very mobile, it's very unstable. It has that blowing, flowing quality. And vata is the dosha that guides anxiety. So when we are dealing with anxiety, we're dealing with an imbalance of the vata dosha, that air and ether element. So we are using practices that will ground us, that will soothe us, that will warm us, that will bring stability, weight, and heaviness into our bodies, not just our physical body, but our subtle body, to balance that air and ether component.
And I'm going to take you through a bit of a practice that will help us to experience that kind of balance. But first, I'd like to share a concept that I wish somebody had said to me. And that is that if you are suffering with this word that we know as anxiety, to know that you are so much more than anxiety, and to give yourself permission to step out of the box of identifying with that word and everything that it means. Know that if you are someone who feels more nervous or worried or anxious, that that does not have to define you, that there's nothing wrong with you, you're not broken in any way, and you didn't do anything bad. This isn't a punishment for something. I always wish that I would have had that information, because even that information can help us to soften and relax a little bit and know that we're not alone, know that this is very common, and know that it's something that we can learn from. When we inquire into why anxiety is moving through us, we can learn a lot about ourselves that can help us feel stronger than we have ever felt. But first, there are some practical things that we can do so that we can calm down, so we have a moment to remember that truth, and even have a moment to connect with the part of us that has never been afraid. And that's really the heart of yoga, and that's something that's really soothed me over the years. So I'll have you place your left hand at the pit of your abdomen and the right hand up at the chest. I'm going to lead you through a breath technique. And the reason that you have a hand at your lower abdomen is so that when you inhale, you can really allow the belly to fill and expand. For a lot of us that are living in low-grade fight, flight, or freeze, we might notice when we take a deep breath in that our breath is moving into the chest rather than into the abdomen. And if you can, begin to cultivate a deep breath so that you feel this area at the low hand really fill and expand first, then expand the rib cage, and then finally the breath can expand the collarbones. Then visualize the breath moving down as you feel the segment of your chest and the rib cage and the abdomen descend as you exhale. Inhale, you feel expansion, low belly, rib cage. And exhale, feel a deflation segment by segment. So chest descends, rib cage descends. And then you can soften and release the lower abdomen. We call this 3-part breath or full diaphragmatic breath. Once you've got that, if you create even more length with the exhalation, a longer exhalation is tied to the other side of the nervous system, and that's the nervous system that is responsible for relaxing us, moving us into our rest and digest. So the longer that you can work with an exhalation, the more you might turn on that aspect of the nervous system. You also want to work on becoming as present as you possibly can. So maybe just the act of bringing your attention to the breath has helped you to move away from thinking and into what is real right here, right now. Maybe you feel the heat of your body beneath that low hand and the heat of your body beneath the hand at the spiritual heart. Maybe you feel the connection of your body on whatever you're sitting on, the air moving towards you. Taking a few conscious breaths and arriving to what is real, typically in the moment, right here, right now, we're okay. Typically in the moment, all is well. It's when the mind moves off into the future and into the past that we start to trigger thoughts that trigger the aspect of the nervous system that makes us feel nervous. And finally, when we're talking about balancing that quality of vata, of air and ether, we want to move in time with breath. So even something as simple as going for a very conscious walk. But I'll show you what you can do in this context. So here you are, breathing deep, watching your breath, allowing the abdomen to really expand and allowing the exhales to lengthen. And then as you inhale, open up the chest. So open up the front of the body and draw the shoulders back so the hands move a little further away from one another. And then as you exhale, round the spine. So both of the hands move a little closer to one another and you're stretching the back of the body. Inhale, open shoulders back, and then exhale, round. And it's most important to really feel like the breath is leading the movement. So beginning of the breath, beginning of the movement, and beginning of the exhale, beginning of the next movement. The next way that we can move in time with the breath here is keep the right hand where it is and then stack the left hand on top. This is also a mudra. It's a movement that we take with our hands that creates a different sense, it cultivates a different quality within the systems of the body. And this one is about self-compassion. And we need a lot of that when we are working with something like anxiety and fear. So finally, the last moving and breathing sequence you can do from here is just inhale and open up. Shoulder blades come towards one another. And beginning of the exhale, beginning of the movement, bring the hands to stack back on. It is the act of anchoring your mind to moving your body in time with your breath that can help you to really ground that mobile, dry, and chaotic and turbulent quality of vata that can become dysregulated within us, and that creates a sense of anxiousness in the body. So any way that you can move in time with the breath, that you can breathe deep, and that you can really connect with your body, this aspect of you that is always present, that will help you to just gain enough clarity and hopefully calm so that you can remember that you are so much more than anxiety.
In addition to movement practices and breath practices and mudras, we also in our work offer lifestyle practices. And creating routine is one way that we can balance that mobile, active vata dosha that guides this thing that's called anxiety. So creating routines around when you eat, creating regular meal times, and also creating routine around bedtime. And as we move into this holiday season, all of those things can get disrupted quite a bit. So our meal times become disruptive. What we're eating is not the same as we normally do. We're going to bed at irregular times. So having these practices gives us a foundation to build upon, to create that grounding, stability, to counteract the imbalance of the vata dosha, the movement of that air and ether. So in our work, Lisa and I offer practices around these very simple things, such as meal times, such as what we're eating, such as when we're going to sleep. So those are some of the things that you will get by working with us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because we only had a short time with you now. So this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the work that we share in our program, which we're in the midst of a Radiant Fall. We have been spending a weekly time with our community that is sharing a Radiant Fall with us, which means that every single Sunday our community receives a really rich video from us that contains seasonally appropriate practices to help us move through life with harmony. We're offering practices that help us reach our wellness goals for our physical bodies, our minds, our emotions, and do help us to connect with that part of us that's always okay. And coming up soon, we're going to be starting a Radiant Winter. And because in the winter time, we've got a different season going on, that means we have a different dosha that might be imbalanced within. So we're offering different practices when it comes to how we think, how we live, how we eat, that can support us through the darker days of winter. Very simple practices. It's not a huge commitment. It's not enormous, overwhelming changes. Our intention is to be there and support you with very gentle, beautiful practices that really just help us to unlearn fear and remember love.
Absolutely. We offer recipes, we offer community, we have a private Facebook group, and we are active in that, discussing our struggles and our triumphs as we incorporate these very simple practices. Everything that we offer is accessible to everyone. They are low impact, they are low cost, they are not time consuming, because we want these practices to sustain you.
Mhm. You don't have to have any experience in yoga or meditation or Ayurveda. Just like our podcast, a radiant fall, a radiant winter, and a radiant year, because some of our community spends an entire year receiving weekly practices from us. These are very accessible skills. So we begin a radiant winter on the winter solstice, in keeping with the season. And if you'd like to find out how to join us, you can head to aradiantyear.com. We would love to meet you there.
Yes, head to aradiantyear.com. We would love to see you on the inside, and we would love to see you use these practices to have a radiant year.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you.